I'm going to just make a short video here. Of course, the big news today was that longtime talk show host, bloviator, provocateur, whatever you want to call him, blabbermouth, whatever, Rush Limbaugh, 70, died after a one-year battle with lung cancer. His wife, apparently, his fourth wife, apparently came on the show today and announced that he had died. And she didn't say where he died, but he lived in Palm Beach, Florida, in a mansion that he's lived in for years. But it's sad. I mean, I didn't agree with anything that he, or much of anything that he said, but lung cancer, I don't wish on anybody. And I had written in my blog today about it, about the death, and I was kind of surprised that he died that soon after he was diagnosed. I'm sure he had it for years, or maybe not that long. I don't know if it was that aggressive. It was stage 4 lung cancer. But I was thinking, because my sister had non-small cell lung cancer, and her late brother-in-law, who was only a year younger than her, he had small cell lung cancer. But both of them lived for years after they were diagnosed. They were both stage 4. And her son-in-law did not die of it. He had it for 10 years. He lived with it for 10 years, but eventually what got him was pneumonia and congestive heart failure. And of course my sister passed away in November of 2019 but of lung cancer, but it was treated for 6 years, or almost 6 years. So she had it longer than 5.5 from the time she was diagnosed. So I just don't quite understand how he died that soon. But then, it may be in the treatments that he had. Maybe his body couldn't handle it, or maybe he just decided, just after the treatments, he just figured it wasn't worth going through it anymore, and decided to let nature take its course. So I feel bad for him that way, but we have to look at it dispassionately. I'm sure his family, mourns his death and everything. He had a brother that's a commentator and author, right-wing. And, of course, he had his wife. And he had different family members. And the interesting thing was he came from a family of lawyers in Cape Girardeau. I bet I misspelled it or mispronounced it, Missouri. And he was born in 1951. But anyway, his family had a bunch of lawyers in it, but he didn't care about that. In fact, he dropped out of college after a couple of semesters, and he wanted to pursue his dream of broadcasting. And he did do it for a few years, but then he wasn't getting anywhere, so he worked in the publicity department for the Kansas City Royals, I think it is, baseball team. And then he decided to jumpstart his career again in the 80s in Kansas City, and then he ended up in Sacramento, and he had this fortuitous meeting, or met Christine Kraft, who was not just a radio talk show host. She was an attorney. She also gained prominence in the 1980s in an age and sex discrimination lawsuit. And one of the big regrets she had in her career was helping boost Rush Limbaugh. And Limbaugh didn't have much of an audience and stuff, and he found that he really couldn't do the slanting act that he did, because of something called the Fairness Doctrine. And this is the thing that is his legacy. The repeal of the Fairness Doctrine in 1987 by the Reagan administration, and I've talked about it, in previous videos, as a part of its deregulation mania of that era. That was the age of Milton Friedman and all this other neoliberal crap that they were pushing. That led directly to Rush Limbaugh, because no longer did local stations have to worry about presenting opposing viewpoints of controversial subjects and not have to worry about their licenses being sanctioned or losing their licenses, which in the Fairness Doctrine they would have risked doing that because of the not just the philosophy, but the reality that the airwaves belong to the public. They are not instruments of propaganda. And when I had first heard the Fairness Doctrine being repealed during the Reagan years, I thought, oh my God, this is the end. We're going to have nothing but propaganda. And this guy was directly the result of that. He was a nobody. And then after its repeal, he went from Sacramento to New York and worked for WABC radio. And that's really where his career took off. And he went into syndication and all that. But he wasn't real happy in New York. So he ended up going to Palm Beach, Florida. And Forbes, in one of the links that I will provide for this video, they said in 2018, he earned $84 million. So he could afford to live the life of luxury in Florida. But this guy contributed to the destruction of public discourse. He's not the only one. He's a symptom, not the cause of it. But it was a disaster. Because what he did is he would go on these shows, whether or not he was sincere with his ideas, but he would go around and call his opponents all kinds of names like feminazi and libs and, you know, all that kind of crap. He was doing that, and he would always go on these long monologues and never present another viewpoint. And then he would have these callers come on, and I don't know if they were paid or they were real callers or what they were, and they would just basically reinforce what he would say. So he only had one slant on it because no more Fairness Doctrine. He didn't have to do it. And this just reinforced the feelings of people who were already on the right, and they got worse and worse and worse. And suddenly you had all this network of right-wing media like Fox, which came along later thanks to further deregulation of the media in the 1990s. And they just had this echo chamber, and they weren't listening to other viewpoints. And so the end result of all this, of course, was Donald Trump and the Capitol Hill riots. All this because of continuous brainwashing and not presenting other points of view. So this is what his legacy is, and it's not a good legacy. It's not a good legacy to leave. And that's all I have to say about him.